Hey there, Diogo here, and I want to welcome you to the very first video of Freedom Week and tell you that along this process, I'm going to show you how I went from a complete financial mess, trying to sort through the noisy world we live in today, to being able to understand the exact steps I needed to take in order to completely take control of my financial life. I now live life with my finances on autopilot. But before we go any further, I need you to understand one thing. I honestly believe you are 100% capable of achieving your financial goals, as long as you do it the right way. It doesn't matter what you've been told or taught up until this point by the people around you. If you're anything like me and most other people, you probably grew up in a culture surrounded by negative people, frustrated with their own lives and unable to come to a place of excitement or change, no matter how hard they try. So, if you still believe the reason you've always had such a hard time controlling your finances and achieving your financial goals is because you've always told yourself, well, I don't have any special gifts or talents, or I believe I'm too old to get started, or even I should have learned this when I was younger, I'm going to show you how, in most cases, these excuses could not be further from the truth. And whether you've been through any type of proper financial instruction, or have even already been through a financial program but never achieved the expected results, I'm going to show you exactly what you'll need to do to go from someone who knows absolutely nothing when it comes to finances to someone who can have a completely healthy financial life in the most simple yet effective way, without messing around with silly games and exercises that you normally see in financial programs that only delay your learning process and generate zero results. And I know this might all seem way too good to be true, but all I'm going to give you throughout this entire week are the steps that I took to take control of my financial life and help other people like you take control of theirs. So I guarantee you that if you implement everything that I'm teaching throughout this video, you'll probably end up like most of my students who could hardly believe the results they saw in such a short period of time, simply by implementing the concepts I'm teaching. My name is Diogo Estevez, and I started my financial journey when I was only 13 years old. And believe it or not, this whole thing started because I believed, at the age of 13, that it was about time I started saving money, if I ever wanted to have a great financial life. So I started my journey by cleaning the shelves of my grandfather's drugstore. Sometime later, I moved up to a post office franchise my father owned back in Brazil. By age 17, I seized the chance to move to the U.S., all by myself, to work as a busboy at a ski resort in Idaho, where I stayed for 4 months. The coolest thing about this experience was that for the first time in my life, I got to live on my own and actually began to make some major money, at least when compared to my previous experiences. And one of the main things my friends and I always talked about was how to make more money by working, not harder, but smarter, as well as how to keep more money in our pockets at the end of the month by simply managing it the right way. I ended up moving to Arizona for 6 months to work at a summer resort as a boat instructor. That's when things really started to pick up financially. It was a dream come true. I ended up going back to Brazil to marry my high school sweetheart, because I had literally worked like a maniac and saved every penny that I could. At 18 years of age, I already had over $20,000 saved up, which gave me a great start in my financial life. Sometime later, we moved back to the U.S. to work and live in some of the most amazing places you could imagine. We spent the next 4 years living and working in places like Colorado, Arizona, and Utah, always working extremely hard and saving up as much as possible so we could eventually start a family and not walk through the difficulties that most people do when it comes to finances. In 2007, we did 3 things. We moved to Florida, bought a house, and had a baby boy. I can tell you for sure, it was a true adventure. But that's when reality finally hit us. We quickly found out the hard way that we were in way over our heads. You see, up until that point, we had no major financial obligations. Our housing expenses were low, car and insurance payments weren't very high, and our food for the month was little to nothing, since we mostly worked in restaurants and got to eat there. Now, with a high mortgage every month, a baby at the house, and my wife attending school full-time, the bills started piling up, and we completely lost track of our finances. I then started looking for ways to bring in additional income, but it seemed like everything I was looking at only consumed more and more time, and at the end of the day, we still had way more month at the end of the money. No matter how much we tried, there was one simple yet gigantic problem. We were spending way more than what was actually coming in. We drained our savings down to a point where we only had $45 in our bank account. In the meantime, as if that wasn't enough, I had lost my job as a sales manager since the company I was working for went bankrupt, and I ended up having to go on unemployment for quite a few months. You can only imagine how desperate we were at that time. Yet, no matter how much we cried and tried to squeeze our finances, there was only one way out. Find something better. Something that could bring more money and consume less time. Just when I thought all hope was lost, a friend of mine called and said that he just started working with a company that helped families manage their finances, and they were looking for some additional help. As you can imagine, that was music to my ears, and that was just the beginning of a new journey I was about to embark on. Over the next few years, I had the opportunity to not only learn how to make more money and better manage my finances, but also help hundreds of families properly protect their families, get out of debt, and save for the future. The problem was that although I could help people in certain areas of their financial life, my work was limited in certain areas, and it didn't allow me to help them with everything they needed, which was very frustrating. I have also seen plenty of scam artists trying to come up with magical solutions that promised to help people get out of the bad situation they were in, but in the end, only left them in a worse financial situation. I have also seen lots of programs that do their best to teach people how to properly manage their finances, and although they have good intentions and good concepts, their methods are complicated and ineffective, making people even more confused than they already were when they first started. People took 12 weeks on average to go through many of the programs out there, which was very exhausting, and at the end of it, they weren't able to remember what had been covered. Seeing this was extremely frustrating for me, and even when I would do my best to coach them through the process and help them apply some of the principles and concepts, it seemed to be over their head, even if they did apply everything. The results would be extremely short-term, and no real transformation would occur in their financial life. They would be even more frustrated and lost than when they first started. Things were just not as effective or simple as they should be. That's when I decided to put an end to it. I started a journey to find one simple yet effective program that would take an average person from having no financial plan whatsoever to being able to pay off their debt and retire the right way. Why? Because they've earned it, after working so hard for so long, likely doing something they didn't enjoy. Surprisingly enough, although I found really good programs out there, none of them would actually take someone from beginning to end. Some would take people all the way through financial high school, but would completely mess up their chances of getting into financial college, while other more advanced programs would not give someone the basic financial education in order to be able to apply the advanced techniques being taught. The whole situation had me so frustrated because I had such limited resources at the time and was not able to help people like I wanted to. I decided to leave the financial services arena altogether and go into real estate, and at the very least, help them invest the money they had worked so hard for so that eventually the money could start working hard for them. And I've got to tell you, the next 4 years were simply amazing, especially when it came to my own financial life. I had already helped hundreds of clients transform their dream of having a home in Mickey Mouse's yard into reality, and at the same time had completely transformed my finances. I had my dream cars, my dream home, and literally every materialistic thing I could possibly want. I had also started my own real estate company, and in just 18 months, I had opened 15 offices between Brazil and the US, as well as a consulting firm and also an interior design company. It was my first successful entrepreneurial experience, and I was having the time of my life. The problem was that after a while, it seemed like the more I grew financially, the less happy I became. There was literally no explanation other than the fact that what I was actually doing was no longer fulfilling my life. I started growing extremely unhappy and unfulfilled, to a point where I could no longer do what I had been doing successfully for the last 4 years. So I decided to leave everything behind and pursue my dream. I needed to do something with my life that would allow me to look back and be proud of what I had accomplished. Material things were no longer important, unless I could have a big impact in people's lives. I wanted to do something that would leave the right kind of legacy behind, the kind where the future generations of my family could look at and feel extremely proud to come from. I started looking back at everything I had done up until that point, trying to remember what had given me the greatest amount of fulfillment and excitement. What I found was that the only thing that allowed me to truly be who I was up until that point was teaching people about their finances and helping them structure a plan that would actually take them from where they were to where they eventually wanted to be. The problem was, I still ran into the same issues I had run into before. The difference was that my knowledge in the financial services arena had grown quite a bit over the years, and after acquiring 10 state licenses in the areas of insurance, real estate, mortgage, and investments, I could actually teach people about this and help them put a plan together. As you can imagine, I was extremely excited. No longer would I ever allow a company or even those financial courses to limit what people could and couldn't learn and do. It was time to thrive. I was ready to make my mark, to leave a lasting legacy behind, and to fulfill my destiny once and for all by helping families like mine to properly plan for the years to come, and what's more important, to put everything they had learned into action in a simple yet effective manner that would not only affect their lives, but also generations to come. As the weeks went by, I got ready to teach what I had learned and applied in my own personal life, and I was going to teach it my way. I started by helping a few local families and quickly found out that many of them were in a worse financial situation than I had anticipated. It had been years since I had met with a family to go over their finances, and because my financial life had evolved at such a good pace, for some odd reason, I had assumed that others' financial lives had as well. I had a tremendous surprise when I first met with these families, as most of the basic financial concepts had never even been taught to them, not by their schools or even their parents. Concepts such as effectively managing their finances, properly protecting their families, setting up a budget that actually worked, or even setting aside enough money so they could eventually retire with dignity. I can tell you for sure, I was on a mission. For the next 3 months, these families studied and followed my methods, and the results they got were simply incredible. Their financial lives took a major positive hit and reached places never before imagined. They were finally able to understand where they stood financially and understand exactly what their financial life looked like for the very first time. I got to see firsthand that the method I had developed actually worked. Well, by now you are probably asking yourself, what method is this? But before I show the method, I want to share something with you that may be even more important than the method itself. It is going to come in the form of a question. Here it is. Why don't you get ahead financially? Why am I asking you this? Because there are plenty of things that will hold you back when you are trying to get financially fit. Maybe you do them on a daily basis, and when it happens, you get frustrated, thinking it's your fault that things aren't going forward, and because of that you end up giving up. And that's exactly why you need to know what you shouldn't do before anything else. Albert Einstein said best, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. You have probably been walking in the same financial pattern for most of your life, many of you not seeing any change, yet desperately wanting to have it. Instead of spending months and years to hear information that you likely won't retain, let's find out exactly what you shouldn't do from now on. Number 1. Don't eliminate all of your debt. You will not get ahead financially by eliminating all debts. You have probably heard over and over again, debt is bad, get out of debt. But the truth is this, becoming debt-free is not the solution to your problems. The reason most people think that getting out of debt is the solution is because financial ignorance has been passed down from generation to generation. And since most people only repeat what they hear and rarely go after the facts, they keep the financial ignorance alive. Think about this. How excited would you be if you had 100% of your expenses, including your debt, paid for every single month, day in and day out, without ever having to lift a finger? If you are looking to grow like the big investors and one day be able to stop working hard for your money and have your money work hard for you instead, you will need to understand that not all debt is created equal, and that yes, there is such thing as good and bad debt. To keep it simple, Good debt is what you need to acquire over the years in order to leverage your money the right way so that it eventually produces income on a monthly basis, such as investment property, to cover 100% of your bad debt, which costs you money, such as a car, a boat, or even that 60-inch TV you have been wanting so bad. You see, one of the biggest problems with society today is that we are taught to think like low and middle class, not like the rich. The educational system surely isn't going to teach you how to think like the wealthy. The wealthy control the schools, and they would much rather keep you financially ignorant. Why? Because somebody has to work to make the rich get richer. It might as well be you. Your parents, on the other hand, always wanted your best. But because they went through the same cycle you are now going through, they never learned how to get out of the rat race. Instead, they kept on repeating the same mistakes that their parents and their parents before them made. Some of them even learned all about the theory behind a healthy financial life, but because it seemed so complicated and overwhelming, they never really got around to putting everything they learned into action. If you tried to teach a small child grammar before speaking, it would take years for that child to be able to say a word. Make sense? Your financial life is the same. Lots of theory and lectures will do you no good. What you need to learn is one piece at a time, putting them into action before moving to the next step, always focused on the goal without allowing your mind to be filled with old and useless pieces of information. So if you want to grow financially, the first thing you have to understand is that not all debt is created equal. And if you are currently on a plan to eliminate all of your debt, I would highly encourage you to pay close attention. Number 2, spend less than what you make. Always keep in mind that it is not about how much you make, but how much you keep. Trust me, I have been on this boat before, and it is a sinking one. No matter how much water you remove, until you fix the holes in the bottom, your boat will never be able to function properly. Most people have a hard time following a budget because it's simply too tight. So when any major emotional stress happens, which is the key behind it all, the first thing they do is to go back to their old ways and start spending what they don't have. I know this seems pretty obvious, but did you know that according to CNBC, American households now have over $16,000 in credit card debt and have no emergency fund whatsoever? Setting a budget and sticking to it, as painful as it may seem in the beginning, is crucial in order to be able to control your finances, but it needs to be done the correct way. Have you ever been on a very restrictive diet? What happened once you got off? If you are like most people and you lost 10 pounds along the way, you very likely gained an additional 10 pounds on top of the pounds you had already lost. Does any of this make any sense? People must learn how to allocate the right percentages to the right categories in order to make this work. Wishful thinking and hope are great tactics when someone is stranded on a deserted island, but will do nothing when it comes to your financial life. Setting a strict budget where there's no room to breathe won't do you any good and will eventually set the plan back quite a bit. People must instead be realistic about their situations, cut expenses where they can, and find out how to make more money in a way that doesn't put a strain on their time. We live in a day and age where technology can be leveraged in ways never before possible. And through the internet, money can now be earned in a matter of minutes when you know what you're doing. There is obviously a big learning curve when it comes to being able to do something like this, but it should be no excuse when it comes to getting ahead financially. This new mindset can be a powerful tool to help you take your financial life to a whole new level. You must also understand that using leverage the correct way and in the right order makes all the difference when it comes to the end result. Number 3, don't invest in a personal home. At least, not right off the bat. Most people believe that owning a personal home is one of the smartest ways they could invest their money, since they are not only acquiring an asset, but also creating a great tax benefit. What most don't realize is that their personal home, although it might already have quite a bit of equity available, is in fact a liability. I know some of the things I'm throwing out there may seem completely insane and go against most everything you've been taught. But we have been programmed to think and act like low and middle class citizens, and one of the first things that we should start to understand is how money works. Let me ask you a question. How far do you believe $150,000 would go in today's economy with the knowledge you currently have? In other words, if I were to hand you $150,000 cash today, and you knew for a fact that because of what you are going to learn this week, that real estate would be one of the best ways to multiply it, how would you go about it? What would the first step be? What would the plan be? You see, people don't know what they don't know. I know that sounds pretty obvious, but I want to dig a little deeper and show you how much they don't actually know. Because we have been taught all our lives that debt is bad. The natural tendency is to stay away from anything that feels, smells, or looks like debt. That is normal. Why? Because you and I have been conditioned all our lives to do this. But this week, we are going to challenge everything you have been taught up until this point. Take John, for example. He was also taught that all debt is created equal and that he should stay as far away from it as possible. John was also taught that real estate is a good investment as long as it is always bought cash. So because of that, when John was handed $150,000, the first thing he did was act on what he learned up until that point and ended up purchasing a property for $100,000 cash. The reason he did this is because he wanted to have some money left over in case something happened with the property, like any major foundation issues, leaks, etc. And even though he had set aside an additional $10,000 between closing and holding costs, as well as any needed initial repairs, he had not analyzed the deal like a true real estate investor would have. You see, he was taught that real estate was a good investment, but was never taught the correct way to do it. John is at peace because the property has no debt, the taxes and insurance are relatively low, and maintenance costs should not run over $1,000 for the entire year. One thing I didn't mention is that John is an introvert, and his people skills are not the best. So he decided to hire a property management company that will charge him 5% of the gross rent of $1,200 to handle everything related to the property, including any maintenance issues and tenant relationship. Like most people, he is worried that if a tenant were to leave, he would have no income from the property. But because he is buying the property in a good location and has an active management company handling everything, chances are the property will be rented by the time the previous tenant leaves. However, we will still consider that the property will be empty 5% of the time just in case. We will consider that John will be keeping this property for the next 30 years and will be appreciating over time at a rate of about 3% each year. So with that in mind, forget everything you see and focus only on what his net worth and cash flow will be, because that is all that matters in the end. As you can see, his net worth will be approximately $243,000, and his cash flow will have been $675,000 at the end of 30 years. Not too bad, right? Well, let's look at two additional scenarios. Kathy is a friend of John's, and like him, she was also taught that real estate is a good investment, but was also taught, as I mentioned before, that not all debt is created equal, and because of that, she had spent the last few years working on building her credit. When the opportunity appeared, she decided to also purchase a $100,000 property and run the same basic numbers that John was using to analyze his deal, with the exception of debt. You see, she understood the power of leverage and decided to leverage her money in a smart way, giving her the ability to purchase the same property with only $30,000 down between the down payment, closing costs, and initial repairs. That gave her the opportunity to get into the real estate game and still have a $120,000 cushion in her bank account in case something really bad were to happen. We will again only need to look at the final numbers for both net worth and cash flow in order to determine how good of a deal she actually made. As you can see, even though Kathy's cash flow at $500,000 is significantly less than John's, which was at $675,000 at the end of 30 years, her net worth is exactly the same. How does that happen? Simple. Someone else, also called the tenant, has been paying down her mortgage for the last 30 years. So when she finally decides to sell the property at the end, she will have made the same amount of profit as John, and even though her cash flow will have been less than his, we must also keep in mind that she also only invested a total of $30,000 when he put up $110,000 to begin with. Do you see the logic here? The issue is that most people are taught to live in fear and to deal with emotions, which almost always ends up taking them to a place they shouldn't be. Knowledge is a key element of this process, and without it, you will for sure end up like most lower and middle class people. Now, let's look at Mark's example. You see, Mark came to this very same class, and by the end of the week, had learned more about money than he had ever learned before. But more importantly, he immediately put everything he learned into action. He has also been working on building a solid foundation to be able to leverage money when he needs to the most, and because of this, he was able to take the same $150,000 and buy 5 properties instead of 1. He used the same numbers as John and Kathy to analyze the deals and make sure that everything was done the safest and smartest way possible. With a total purchase price of $500,000, the $150,000 he initially had was also split between the down payment, closing costs, and initial repairs. As you can see, his property tax, insurance, and maintenance fees were also increased since he purchased 5 properties instead of 1. At the same time, his gross rent also went up from $1,200 per month to $6,000, while considering the same 5% for both management fees and vacancy rate. He will also keep the properties for 30 years and will consider that his investment will increase by 3% every year until he sells. Now, you may be looking at these numbers and thinking that you will probably never see anything like this in your life. If so, you are absolutely right. The reason I say this is because your way of thinking up until this point has led you to where you are, and that is the biggest thing I want to help you with. And as you can see, they absolutely do. When you look at the 2 major factors, net worth and cash flow, you will quickly realize that his numbers went through the roof at over $1.2 million for his net worth and almost $2.5 million for his cash flow throughout the 30 years. I need you to keep in mind that this is the same $150,000 that both John and Kathy received. Nothing more, nothing less. Do you see how with a little applied and effective knowledge, Mark's life was completely transformed? No magic tricks or get-rich-quick solutions. Just good old-fashioned strategy and common sense. Now I have a question to ask you. Given the same $150,000 to begin with, who would you rather be? John, Kathy, or Mark? Are you going to allow scarcity and pain or abundance and pleasure to drive your life? Think about that. You see, it's not a matter of right or wrong. It is simply a matter of how fast you want to get to your goals. Simple. The choice is yours. And now that we have learned what not to do with our finances, I want to talk about what we should do in order to achieve the results we are looking for. However, we are going to leave that for our next video because I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information all at once. For now, allow what I taught in this video to soak in. Begin changing the way that you think about finances and the way you think about debt. Ask yourself what you have been doing wrong over the lifetime of your financial decisions and begin dreaming about how you will break the status quo of low and middle class financial thought patterns. And in the video that will be available on Wednesday, I'm going to share with you the best technique I use to keep my financial life up to date, spending less than 5 minutes a day. Before you close this video, leave me a comment below telling me some of your thoughts. Let me know if you learned anything or if something that I've shared today has come as a shock somehow. I would love to hear from you and get your feedback, so like and share this video with your friends. That way, we can start building a strong community of people who are interested in taking their financial life to a completely new level. Thanks for your input, and I look forward to hearing from you on the next video.